Sir, I have myself full confidence that if all do their duty, if nothing is neglected, and if the best arrangements are made as they are being made, we shall prove ourselves once more able to defend our island home, to ride out the storm of war, and to outlive the menace of tyranny, if necessary, for years, if necessary, alone. At any rate, that is what we are going to try to do. That is the resolve of His Majesty's government, every man of them. That is the will of Parliament and the nation. The British Empire and the French Republic, linked together in their cause and in their need, will defend to the death their native soil, aiding each other like good comrades to the utmost of their strength. Even though large tracts of Europe and many old and famous states have fallen or may fall into the grip of the Gestapo and all the odious apparatus of Nazi rule, we shall not flag or fail. We shall go on to the end. We shall fight in France. We shall fight on the seas and oceans. We shall fight with growing confidence and growing strength in the air. We shall defend our island, whatever the cost may be. We shall fight on the beaches. We shall fight on the landing grounds. We shall fight in the fields and in the streets. We shall fight in the hills. We shall never surrender. And if, which I do not for a moment believe, this island or a large part of it were subjugated and starving, then our empire beyond the seas, armed and guarded by the British fleet, would carry on the struggle until, in God's good time, the new world, with all its power and might, steps forth to the rescue and the liberation of the old. That is a speech, We Shall Fight on the Beaches by Winston Churchill, the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom. He delivered that on June of 1940, I think June 4th of 1940. And that was, of course, after the evacuation of British soldiers and many French soldiers on the beaches of Dunkirk towards the beginning of World War II. So the podcast for today, what we're doing is we're going to be looking at both Dunkirk and Saving Private Ryan. And if you've seen both films, you understand why we're pulling these two things together. So I'll introduce myself. So hello and welcome to Ignore the Bell. My name is Nathan.
And I'm Tyler.
And originally the idea for this is that we wanted to get it uploaded for Remembrance Day in Canada. And do they call it Remembrance Day in the United Kingdom?
Yeah.
Great.
Okay. Actually, I don't know.
I don't know what they call it there, but we call it Remembrance Day, November 11th, which is to commemorate the end of World War I, right? November 11th at the 11th hour, at the 11th minute, the 11th month, right? All of that. And in the United States, then they call it Veterans Day. So for any Americans watching, then that's the distinction, like same day. And we have different names for it. But we wanted to get it posted for Remembrance Day / Veterans Day. I didn't have a chance to get to rewatching both movies before then. But the idea behind this is it's somewhat of a thematic podcast to look at two of the best World War II movies of all time. I think undisputedly people would say, like, certainly they're up there as two of the best World War II movies you can possibly find. And so to compare them, but like thematically to kind of fit with Veterans Day / Remembrance Day, but at the same time to look at these two films because it's really interesting because it is, getting these hundreds of thousands of soldiers off of the beaches, that evacuation and really the abandonment of Europe in 1940, and then to see what those beaches look like, because that was Dunkirk, right? And then Saving Private Ryan, the very beginning of it, to see how much the landscape had changed. And just a few years later, right? 3 years later, right? 3, 4, I forget.
Yeah.
3, 4 years later.
3 or 4.
Yeah. To go back and then to see what Nazi Germany had done with establishing all of their little like pillboxes and like foxholes and all of that stuff, and to prevent the Allies from recapturing the beaches of northern France, to see the comparison of Dunkirk and the abandonment of it, and then to see them coming back with the D-Day invasion. And to kind of compare the two films in that way. So I thought it was a kind of a cool idea to look at both of them together. So that's going to be the podcast, and I hope you enjoy.
Oh man, I wish this discussion could go on forever.
Ignore the bell. We're gonna keep going, people.
All right, so we are talking about Dunkirk and Saving Private Ryan. So Dunkirk was released in 2017. It's a Christopher Nolan film, in case anybody was not aware, and he both wrote and directed that. His brother did not write that one. I was not aware of that
Right.
until recently, because isn't like most of his films, and his brother, who's a fiction writer,
Yeah.
writes literature, then he mostly writes the screenplays, and then Christopher ends up directing them. Is that correct?
Yeah. Yeah, I believe so. Yeah, and his brother is Jonathan Nolan, who has worked on things like Westworld as well. So, um,
Right.
but yeah, this Christopher Nolan is very well known for his use of, well, he's very well known, but also for his use of um, uh, unusual time depictions in film.
Yes.
And this film very much holds up to that expectation.
Yeah, absolutely. He's always playing around with, I mean, maybe not always, but very, very often. He really is interested in narrative, like non-chronological narratives, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Going out of order in terms of the linear order of events with chronology. So, yeah, so that one is from 2017, and of course it was hugely popular. I'm just like taking a quick look. The budget is estimated to be between somewhere from 100 to 150 million, but at the box office it was like 526 million. Like, yeah, at least according to like what I've been reading, then it's the most successful World War II film ever in terms of overall box office revenue. But of course, I don't know if that's adjusted for inflation,
Right. Yeah.
because I imagine that Saving Private Ryan like was also incredibly popular. And yeah,
Yeah.
there's no way that's not adjusted for inflation, because according to at least and okay, you can criticize me for using Wikipedia, but I'm just like for the sake of speed here that I'm using this. And Saving Private Ryan had a budget of 70 million and at the box office did 482 million. Um, but that was back in 1998, and so
Yeah.
it would have surpassed Dunkirk adjusted for inflation. I'm sure it would have. Um,
Right.
Not that I'm trying to like necessarily turn it into like you know competition between the two, but
Right.
it bugs me when people say the most profitable film ever, and then I'm like, did you adjust it for inflation? Because it's one thing in like the
Yeah.
1940s when people are paying like 25 cents or something to go to the
Yeah.
movies compared to somebody
Absolutely.
paying like 12 bucks. So yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. But yes, both of these films are very popular depictions um, of World War II, and uh, it is startling how different they are.
Yeah, yeah. I just want to finish just going over just a little bit
Yeah.
of the background information on Saving Private Ryan. So this Saving Private Ryan is of course directed by Steven Spielberg. Was released in 1998. Um, Boy, he's got a bunch of production companies on there. Dunkirk only has one, but there's four production companies for, and then two different distributors. But with Saving Private Ryan, it's DreamWorks, Paramount, Amblin, and Mutual Film. Those are all the production companies associated with it, and then distributed by DreamWorks and Paramount. But then Dunkirk, as far as the production company, is Syncopy, Syncopy.
Yeah. I believe
Uh,
it's Syncope, but
Syncope.
yeah.
Okay. And then distributed by Warner Brothers. That's it. Uh,
Right. Yeah.
but yeah, so yeah, we're gonna talk about the two of them, and you are right that they are incredibly different, but they are both noted for their historical accuracy.
Mm.
Uh, and that's something that's interesting because you don't really have uh, there's a lot of military films and war films that end up becoming like they take on too much of a Hollywood sheen to them,
Right. Yeah.
and where it's over the top, and you've got these cartoonish superhero type figures who are doing just completely unrealistic things, and they kind
Yeah.
of cover over a lot of the chaos more than anything else of being in battle, right?
Hmm.
Um,
Yeah. Yeah. One that springs to mind, and I have not seen it, but maybe you can uh, clarify. Would Pearl Harbor be one of those as well?
yeah, like Pearl Harbor being noted for what? For its historical accuracy or for its Hollywood
Or it's
um,
Hollywood over the
nature?
top?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, I mean, it's been a while since I've seen Pearl Harbor, but I know like I believe they've got like, because I don't know if I've even seen the film all the way through.
Mhm.
But I know they've got the love story kind of tacked on there,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And it's just, you really don't get that with either Saving Private Ryan or Dunkirk. You
Right.
know what I mean?
Yeah.
The most you get is like Tom Hanks kind of talking about his wife, and then it's just like, yeah, she's not going to recognize me. I'm a totally different person. It's kind of the antithesis of Hollywood romance, of just
Right.
like, and it's not like it's some other woman or this is a marriage falling apart. It's just like, yeah, like war is brutal. It's brutal on the psyche. It's brutal on the body. It's brutal for families. It's brutal for everyone.
For
And
sure.
these films show that because you've got numerous characters in both films who really struggle psychologically with what's going on, which is good to see. It's good to see it being
Yeah.
depicted because that's to me, that's partially what makes something a good film depicting war, in that it's not, um, you know, like pasting over all of the ugliness to it, right? That if you
Hmm.
glamorize it, then to me that doesn't do a good job of recognizing just how much of a sacrifice everyone involved was actually making.
Yeah. Yeah. And it is, I think that these films are both, like they are so well done uh in their depiction of uh I don't know how to say it. Like it's 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 the sense of victory on the war. You know what I mean? Like they each have their climactic resolutions,
Hmm.
and both of them, then you do feel uh, you do feel that the characters have lived through something and survived, but it's not the end of the war for either of these
Right.
films, and it is very well done in that.
Yeah, and that is really interesting with both of them, and thinking about that, not just like because you can look at these films that you can analyze them and discuss them in a number of different ways from different lenses, but from a screenwriting standpoint, just a storytelling standpoint, not even necessarily being specific to film, that's such an interesting thing to say the
Yeah,
story's not over, but here's a
yeah,
resolution for these characters. If you look at a whole bunch of different movies, especially movies that are like it's where it's a series, then trying to decide where to stop this film and then this film and then this film can be very difficult to do. Um, and the way these films are doing that is interesting because you're right. You really do get a sense of resolution for the characters without actually saying, but the war is resolved.
right. Yeah,
Yeah, that's a good
yeah,
point. Because they both do end quite well, like where it is a satisfying, logical place to end
yeah,
both films, but the war is far from over in both cases.
absolutely. Yeah. And that is one of the things that I really love most about Dunkirk is that it is telling a story that I think is very, very often overlooked. Um, and it, it it is it was described by Christopher Nolan as not a war film, but an evacuation film.
Mm.
And I think that does come across really well, where the victory is in how many people were rescued and not in how many people were killed.
Yeah, absolutely. And you do get, and this is kind of jumping ahead, but at the end of the film, then when they're coming back and the soldiers are just um, really forlorn, they
Mm.
just think that they're going to be completely rejected by everyone back home in Great Britain, and they don't want to go back because they're ashamed of the fact that they had to evacuate. And then when you've got that old man who's blind and the characters don't realize it, right? And he's
Mhm.
handing out the blankets to them, right? And then he's not looking at them because he's just reaching down and grabbing them and handing them. And then it's like he's like, well done, well done, well done. And the guy he says something like, like, what do you mean? Like, we didn't do anything, we just, like, all we did was we survived. And then the old man says, that's enough,
Yeah,
right? And
yeah,
it's and then you realize afterwards that he's blind, because then he, like, reaches for that one guy's face. But, like, you
yeah.
get this dramatic irony where we know this, but they don't know this, the soldiers don't know this. And
Mhm.
but that is it's such an interesting thing, as it being an evacuation film, that is enough.
Yeah,
And it is because what you see at the beginning with of Saving Private Ryan, with the D-Day invasion, could not have been possible in many ways without the evacuation at Dunkirk, saving 300,000 soldiers,
yeah,
right?
absolutely.
To maintain Britain's standing army, to be able to, uh, you know, withstand the Nazi Germany for, years, until they could arrange for the D-Day invasion, and until, the United States got involved in the war and everything else. And yeah, it's that is interesting that Nolan considers it to be an evacuation film. But evacuation can be an important tactic in war.
Absolutely.
Like,
And it's not surrender, right? It
no, it's
is,
not surrender.
yeah, as Winston Churchill so effectively stated in his speech, they will not surrender. It was not about giving up on on the war. It was about, yeah, strategic
Yeah,
redeployment. Um,
exactly. Which is why they didn't, and you get the soldiers who are standing there on the beach, who are, getting more and more frustrated of, why is the RAF, the Royal Air Force, where are they? Where are destroyers? Where's the Royal Navy? Like, where are the ships? Where are the planes? Why are we just standing here? And it's like, well, because they didn't want to abandon Britain. They
yeah,
didn't, or to lose, numbers of ships and planes, um, you know, in, like across the channel in the northern part of France, when it's like, yeah, like, they just invaded France and invaded a bunch of other European nations, and you got to know, like, they're going to be coming for us too. And so it's being strategic in how you fight them.
yeah.
Yeah. But I mean, I can't imagine, like, obviously, it's unimaginable to be in that position for those soldiers, to, to just feel like you're getting strangled, right? That the Nazi Germany, like, they are just closing in and closing in and closing in, and are continually, like, retreating to a smaller and smaller section, trying to hold them off. And even getting, like, because that's how Dunkirk begins, is the Luftwaffe dropping the pamphlets of saying, you're surrounded, you know,
Yeah,
give
yeah,
up. And I don't know, that that would be so. I don't think that, like, I have no idea how I would respond in that kind of circumstance. But you can, like, just even trying to imagine what that would be like, to get that kind of propaganda falling from the sky, and to
right.
know that it's not entirely wrong,
Yeah,
and then
yeah,
to just
absolutely.
wait, to just wait.
Yeah.
Um,
And that is, I think, what Christopher Nolan does so well in this film. He is depicting something that is uh, pretty much impossible to imagine. And we
Yeah.
get a lot of different reactions to what is happening.
Yes.
And uh, yeah, it is incredible to see that much truth put to screen.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a really good way of putting it. And I do like that you get a lot of variation in characters, that it's
Mm,
not like everyone is reacting exactly the same way.
yeah.
And I'm sure that's exactly how it went. That you have some who dealt with it better than others. And that's not a judgment on anyone, right?
Right.
Because,
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know how you can possibly judge anyone in that kind of a position. So yeah, so let's talk about Dunkirk then. And so it's interesting what he's doing with narrative, and because it is a Christopher Nolan film, then it's often interesting what he's doing with chronology and what he's doing
Yes.
with the linear nature of it, and then saying, well, I'm not going to go in that order, and having time jumps or going in a non-chronological storytelling mode. um, Now, this is just one little interesting thing that I was thinking of with it when I was rewatching it. So you've basically got three different storylines that all more or less come together. And that's kind of the climax of the film, is these three storylines that are all happening at different paces. They ultimately come together in what ends up being essentially the climax of the film, but that's not really a very good term for it. Um,
Yeah.
but the resolution, perhaps.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. I think that's about as effective a term as we can use here.
yeah.
It is.
So they all come together, but they're moving at different paces, right? So
Mhm.
you've got land that's taking place over a week. Is that correct?
I believe so. Yeah.
And then sea, it's taking place over a day, and then air is taking place over an hour. And
Yeah.
then ultimately they all end at the same place. So basically you've got land and then sea and then air, and they're all going to end right here, right?
Yeah.
But he does kind of do a little bit of repetition in, coming back, and there is a little bit of non chronological order to the well, I guess to all of them. He is kind of going out of order at parts. There's some time jumps in there, going backwards
Right.
and forwards. uh, but the interesting thing that I thought of is it's almost like there's a brief little overview of the history of war right there, because
Right.
if you're moving on land, that's going to take the longest. If you are moving by foot, that
Mhm.
takes the longest, and it's the most tedious way of trying to move from one place to another. By sea can be quite a bit faster, right? Quite a bit faster, and it's much easier. Certainly, if you're moving like a whole bunch of troops and equipment. Are we still okay?
Yeah.
Okay.
Sorry, I'm just double checking on the timelines to make sure that we do have it.
Yeah, I was trying to
Accurate.
pay attention. I know that I know that I'm right on two of them. I just couldn't remember what it was for the land section.
Yeah, yeah, I do believe that it is. It is. I know that it's 1, 1, and 1. Yeah, the air is 1 hour, the sea is 1 day, and the mole or the land is 1 week. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So then, and then moving by air, by plane, then that's the fastest of those three modes of transportation. And that has been the history of war. Is it started out on land entirely, and then you started getting ships, you started getting battles at sea, and this goes back a couple thousand years, like to starting to get battles at sea with like the Greeks, and right, like it goes
Right.
back a
Yeah.
ways. um, but then the most recent one is, by air with an air force and having planes. And it's interesting that the way he's choosing to tell the story in terms of narrative matches that, where it matches that in a really, to me, I think I don't think that I'm reading too much into this, and whether there's intention on his part or not, then it's like, even if you're looking at the history of war, you're saying most of it's been on land,
Yeah.
and then a fair bit of it has been on sea, and then a very, very small amount of it, but a very significant amount of it, has been in the air.
Yeah.
And he's kind of showing all three of them in terms of like the amount of time that it takes to do all of these things with these
Yeah.
three different terrains, environments.
Yeah,
It's
that
not even
is really
three,
interesting.
isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, so I don't know what to make of it other than that's just an interesting thing I think that's happening when it comes to the narrative and the amount of time that he is not even that we're getting on screen, but in terms of the story, the amount of
Mhm.
story that we're getting. Um, so
Yeah. Yeah. It is it is very effective storytelling. It is uh, yeah, it's hard to imagine what this film would be like if he didn't make that decision. Um,
yeah,
but it's
I can't imagine it without the way without going in this particular way of switching
mhm.
between the three of them, having them take place at different speeds,
Yeah.
but coming together. The, it's satisfying because it forces you to work as a viewer. It
Mhm.
forces you to pay attention to figure out what's actually happening. That do you know what I mean? Like, and I know that's the criticism of film, and I think that it's not entirely a bad criticism, especially for much of what we get with movies, is that the stories they're spoon fed to you in
Right.
comparison to something like literature, where you have to work a little bit more to, you know, really get a sense of what's happening
Yeah.
because like the writer's doing half of the work and then the reader's imagination completes that work, but with a film it's all just right there. But Nolan's forcing us to work a little bit harder here, and I appreciate that. But I think that it makes it it ends up meaning that if he just told it like I don't even know how else you could tell this story because like how could you jump between the two or between the three if you're saying well one of them is taking place over the course of a week and one of them is taking place over the course of a day and one of them is taking place over the course of an hour, then when do you start showing the one that's taking place over the hour? Wouldn't Tom Hardy's character not show up until like the last like 15 minutes of the movie? And
Yeah.
that would just be so frustrating. Right?
Yeah, absolutely.
It's just
Yeah.
like what, an hour and 45 minutes of them, or an hour and a half of them just standing on the beach, and then eventually the boats get deployed, and
Mhm.
then finally you see three planes.
Yeah. Yeah, and like I think you're right. I don't think that this story really could be told any other way, and that's why I am glad that it was Christopher Nolan who decided to make this film on this historical event. If you were to watch a documentary on it, then basically how you just described would be how it would play out. You would spend all this time with the soldiers on the land
Yeah.
and then on the sea, and then be introduced to those in the air. Um, and but because this is cinema and because it is, uh, yeah, just well, I shouldn't say cinema because I don't want to uh, make it seem like documentaries are not cinema, but
Mm.
um, because this is a narrative uh, film, then you need to be introduced to all the different characters pretty much toward the beginning of the film.
Yeah.
Um, and yeah, it is incredibly well done.
It is. I mean, the way, and this might seem like a little bit of a non sequitur, but I think it does tie in. The way I have typically taught poetry when I'm teaching it in the classroom is I tell my students one way to approach poetry is to treat it like a riddle. And your job is to figure out, like, to solve the riddle. So the writer, the poet, is going to give you enough clues that you can figure out what it is exactly that they're talking about, whether it's a feeling or whether it's an
Right.
event. And it's your job to pay as close of attention as possible to all the little clues. And some of them are going to be subtle, some of them are going to be overt. And it's your job to figure out what did you mean by that? What was your point? What was your purpose? Because if they just give it to you directly, it's not satisfying because there is a huge amount of satisfaction that you can get from solving a riddle or solving a puzzle, whether you're talking about like
Absolutely.
puzzle boxes or, like a jigsaw puzzle. Like puzzles they can be difficult and at times frustrating, but that satisfaction of going, I solved it, right? That feels so good. And to me, that's what he's doing with the narrative here. He's jumbled it up, but it's not impossible to solve. It's not indecipherable, but it does force you, because like when you're watching the sequence, like the storyline where you've got the father and his son on the boat, where you see them rescuing different people in the water at various points, but you don't quite realize until the very end of the film. You're like, oh, it was the guys on the beach who got into that ship with the Dutch captain. Was he Dutch? I can't remember. Maybe he was Belgian. In any case, I
don't remember. So,
but they get on the boat with him, the one that starts getting, shot up by the Germans, right? And then it's sinking, but they're getting closer to that, like, I don't know what it is, but like I think it's maybe a destroyer. I don't know enough about the Royal Navy to know, but basically the big ship, right? They're getting closer and closer to that one, and then that one ends up getting bombed, and then it starts to go down. But then you see the ship with I think it's called the Moonstone, where you've got the father and his son and his son's friend, right? Where you see there's a bunch of guys over here in the water, and then a bunch of guys over here, right? The ones who had jumped off of that ship, and you're like, wait, what are these guys doing here? How did they get all the way over there when you first see it? And then it's not until the end of the film, and you go, oh, it's because they were coming from a different ship, and then that one sunk before the other one did. So that's how come they were separate from that other group where the oil had all leaked out.
Yeah.
Right? But when you first see it, you don't know who it is that he's rescuing or why. And there's a lot of things that don't make sense. Like, you could look at this, and if you don't watch until the end of the film, you would say this is a bad movie, because it seems like there's continuity errors. Because at the very beginning, watching them on the beach, the skyline, like the actual sky itself, changes color so much. It goes from a bright blue day with white puffy clouds to very, very gloomy and overcast. And then there's moments where there's sea foam, and then moments where there's no sea foam. And then you're just like, they couldn't even film on similar days when it looks the same. And then it's like, no. This is a puzzle. He's giving you little clues. And he did tell you 1 week. He doesn't have some narrator voice like a James Earl Jones that comes on there and it's like, the first story on the mole takes place over 1 week. What that means is, right? It just says the mole 1 week. And you're like, what does that mean, 1 week? But you have to figure it out by paying attention.
Yeah, because you also don't get any additional on-screen text after the initial explanation. It's not, 6 days out, 5 days out, or anything like that. No, it's just, you are presented with, this takes place over 1 week. You figure out, what takes place on each of those days. And
exactly. Because he's not telling you day 1, day 2, day 3. So this is where it's more of a challenging film, but to me it's satisfying because it forces you to pay attention, because otherwise I just think that it would just be too difficult to watch. It would just be frustrating to just have like an hour plus of screen time of these guys on the beach and just going in chronological order, just going like, just is this torment? Somebody do something, rescue these guys, right? But instead you see, no, they're sending ships. They're sending civilian ships. They're sending every ship that they have possible to go there. And they are on their way. And it's, will they get there in time? And then they have planes going. Will the planes survive? Will they get there in time? So you get all of this dramatic tension within it while still being historically accurate. But you're right, it's not going in the order and the pace that a documentary would very likely take this in.
Yeah.
Present this in. So it's from a narrative standpoint, like I've said it before, like sometimes when I look at Christopher Nolan films and I mean I have not caught him yet, but usually the first time I'm watching it, then and especially afterwards, then I go, was that just a gimmick? You know, like if you're looking at like Memento, right? Then I'm like,
Right.
was this just a gimmick, or was this really necessary to the story? But with Dunkirk, I think the more you look at it, the more you realize it absolutely is best told this way. And it probably would have been a pretty, I don't know,
Forgettable.
yeah, I was gonna say unremarkable film, but yeah,
Yeah.
forgettable. But like forgettable or unremarkable in terms of World War II films if he didn't go in this order.
Hmm.
So
Yeah. Yeah. All right. We have been going for about a half hour, so we should definitely hop into Saving Private Ryan, and
sure,
we'll definitely make, more associations and go
yeah,
back and forth. But yeah,
yeah. So I mean, obviously, and this is what everybody talks about with Saving Private Ryan. It's the first, what is it, like 25 minutes or so of the film.
yeah, something like that. Yeah.
Um,
Um,
but
I was
can I
gonna say
just?
like 15, but yeah, it might be.
I think it's a fair bit longer than that.
Yeah, it probably is.
Yeah, let me just see if I can quickly find it here. The but before we get into that, one of the things that I should say when it comes to the because we're on the topic of narrative. So comparing Dunkirk to Saving Private Ryan, so one of the things that I would insist on if I were to teach this at all is that this is a frame narrative. That it
Right.
does not just start with D-Day, because a lot of people think of Saving Private Ryan just starts with D-Day, and it's just like
Yeah.
they storm the beaches, just like brrr, you're like for 25 minutes or whatever it is. But it
Yeah.
doesn't start that way. It's actually a frame narrative where
Hmm.
you've got, and I don't think this is spoiling it for anybody, but you've got Ryan. What's his first
Yeah.
name? I can't remember. The
James.
James Ryan. So who's played by Matt Damon when he's younger, but they did not age him for the elderly, not even elderly, just senior Ryan. Do you know what I
Right.
mean? They got a totally different actor,
Yes. Yeah.
which I
Um,
think is good. I don't
yes, I
like it when
agree.
they age actors. It usually looks awful.
Yeah. Yeah. Staying on this point, I was originally shown, like the first time that I saw any part of Saving Private Ryan was just the first 10 to 15 minutes. It wasn't the entire uh, D-Day sequence. It was just like the first 10 to 15 minutes. In one of my university film classes.
Hmm.
And then the professor asked, like what is um, what is the inference? Like, what is your inference on, based on this first sequence? And, everybody has that same feeling that, well, we're seeing this veteran,
Hmm.
um, and then you immediately, are shown Tom Hanks. So
Sure.
you immediately, think that Tom Hanks must be the veteran.
Of course.
Yeah. And it's so effective because yeah, like if you don't know that going into the film that it isn't, and you have that moment and then you get toward the end and you realize, that it isn't Tom Hanks, that he actually doesn't survive,
Right.
and that it's, you know, James Ryan
Yeah.
who is just reflecting on everything that Tom Hanks's character went through in order to save his life.
Yeah.
Like it is beautiful. Like I am actually getting goosebumps right now just talking about
Yeah.
it. Is
They're both such affecting films. It's
yes.
it's so difficult to watch either one and not be moved. Um,
Yeah.
and I think it's interesting too, like not just the way these stories are being told, but like because even if you have even if you have serious issues when it comes to using the military to solve conflicts, even if you're a pacifist, e- like World War II
It
is like the one war that
right. Yeah.
basically everyone is like, yeah, that's a just war in order to stop what was happening, especially in Europe with the Holocaust. And Spielberg does a
Yeah.
good job at the beginning of Saving Private Ryan and at the end with the frame narrative, because you're in Arlington and you get all of the crosses, but you also see that there's a number of graves where you've got the Star of David. Yeah, exactly. And very prominently that he, it was absolutely intentional that he has it on there to show that, this is not just any war, right?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And I mean, there are some choice, dialogue. There is some choice dialogue.
Which I think is it Adam Goldberg's character who's like got his Star of David and with like the prisoner of wars that they capture like from the Nazis, and he goes Juden, like to prove, like, hey, this Jewish guy right here, and we got you.
Yeah. It is incredible how many emotions Spielberg is able to capture in Saving Private Ryan, because it does have those moments of levity in it.
It does.
Without being humorous or without actually being laugh out loud funny, there are humorous moments and moments of levity, which are then obviously juxtaposed against the brutality of everything.
The only one that I can really think of in Dunkirk, because you are right, because I think in Saving Private Ryan, because it's a long film, then the longer the film is, the more room there can be between your very moving beginning and your ending with the frame narrative, the more room there is to actually have some shifts in terms of like to have some comedy punctuated in there. The only one in Dunkirk that I can think of is at one point when like the two like commanding officers, one for the Army and one for the Navy, then the Army commanding officer says something like, oh, like I thought the tide came in like every 3 hours. Then the Navy officer says, it's every 6. And he's like, no, I was sure it was 3. And he's like, well, good thing you're in charge of the Army and I'm in charge of the Navy. Like the naval officer should damn well, I'm pretty sure he's the expert on this, right? That's the only joke that I could think of in Dunkirk. Otherwise, I don't know that there's any. So
yeah.
But it's a good joke.
Oh, absolutely.
Because it's so natural. Because you're like, I could see these guys and they've gotten to know each other fairly well. But the Army and the Navy are not necessarily going to be spending a lot of time together. But being stranded for a week, these two commanding officers are ultimately going to start having more and more conversations.
And it's not said as a joke.
No, it's not said as a joke. It's really funny.
Yeah.
But yeah, so Spielberg does have some comedy mix in there, but he is giving you the full, maybe not the full gamut, but he's giving you quite a few different emotions, emotional highlights within the film. And so the frame narrative, you are right that in terms of who we're identifying with when it comes to our protagonist and the narration, then you of course do assume, and this is intentional, I'm sure. There's no way Spielberg did not do this on purpose. That of course you begin it and you do assume that that's going to be Tom Hanks's character, and then it's at the end where it ends up being much more emotional as a frame narrative, because you realize that Tom Hanks, he died to save this man, and said make it worth it. And the interesting thing at the beginning of the frame narrative and then comparing it to the end is you see this senior, this veteran, where boy does he have a lot of people with him, right?
Yes.
Of all several generations. And you say, when they were rescuing him, when they were going after Ryan, it's all for one man, to save one man. But that frame narrative proves it was not to save one man. It was to save his entire family that would not exist were it not for him, right? That you see, of course, his wife, she would, of course, be okay, but then their children and then their grandchildren, right? That's ultimately what you did when you saved this character of Ryan. You allowed a couple generations of Americans, and then even beyond this, generations and generations and generations of Americans to have a life at all because you saved one person. And it shows the and this is where I think they pair so well, because Saving Private Ryan is all about saving just saving one person, and Dunkirk is about saving 300,000 people.
Right.
So you say, look at how moving that story is of the significance of saving one human life, and then when you look at Dunkirk and you say there were 300,000 human lives that were saved on with the evacuation at Dunkirk.
Yeah, and I have to again just point out how incredible that true story is of them honestly believing that they would only be able to save about like I think it's like 20 to
30,000. Yeah.
30,000.
Yeah.
Like 30,000 was like best estimate
Right.
essentially. And the fact that they were able to get, more than 10 times that many is yeah, I don't have words for it.
Right. And it's both the bravery and determination of everyone involved in the rescue effort, including ordinary citizens who did go across just with their, pleasure
Yeah.
boats to
Yeah.
save like people going into a war when they are not soldiers.
Yeah.
They're
And you
not
see that
sailors.
on and you see that on the ship that we follow,
Yeah,
where like the first soldier that they rescue is then fighting them. He's
that's
like,
right.
no, 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 we can't go back. Like I'm not going back there. That's what
Right.
he's thinking, and
Yep.
it to see that those ordinary citizens are like, there are more of you out there who also want to be saved, and we can't just abandon them. We can't give up on them.
Yeah, and you don't get it until the very end of the film, but the father of the ship, the like who's on the ship, the Moonstone, then you find out that his eldest son was in the Air Force, which is how he's able to know enough about the planes and to be able to evade
Right.
it to save all of the guys who are on his boat. But you find out that his son died like only a few weeks into the war, but it,
Yeah.
it really highlights what he says earlier to, I forget the actor's name, but the guy who plays Scarecrow. You
Oh,
know,
yes, Killian Murphy. It was
right. Yeah. So what he ends up like the exchange that he has, which is, I forget the exact line, but it's something along the lines of, like, well, we're the ones like paying for it, like this elder generation. Like, why can't we, you know, like try to save some
right.
some people,
Yeah.
right? And it's like going after like the pilot where his ship is sinking and his, other son is saying, like, no, like, don't bother, don't bother, don't bother. And it's like, I know that he might be dead, but we have to try, right? Because of course
Yes.
you get that punctuated at the end where you realize that his son, who was in the Air Force, he died. And you can tell that it's like, I would have wanted somebody to go after him, even if it seemed futile, even if it
Yeah.
seemed like there was no point, that he must be gone. And that's what you get with both of these films, is like going after somebody like Ryan. It's like, well, it's so dangerous. Why should we do this? And it's for one person. Why should we do this? Why should we risk all of our lives when there's no certainty? And both films are showing, despite all of the loss of human life, they're showing the importance of saving human lives, of
Yes.
even if the numbers are way off, even if far more die than survive, we should be grateful for the fact that we have so many who did survive.
Yeah. I know that you hate this line from from Star Wars: The Last Jedi, but it is very true in this case of, we don't win by fighting what we hate, but by saving what we love. Um, and that I think is exemplified in both of these films of it's neither one is directly about fighting the enemy, but about
Yeah.
saving.
Yeah, and I think that contrasts really well with what you have in terms of the ideology of the Nazis, right?
Right. Yeah.
That the Nazis really have no respect for human life. Because I think even their own soldiers. I think it was far more utilitarian than caring about the preservation of their soldiers. Do you know
Yeah.
what I mean? Like, you can't commit the atrocity of the Holocaust and say that, oh, well, we care about some human lives but not all human lives. It's like you don't care about human beings. You don't care about the sanctity of human life. And to
Yeah.
show that with what you have with the United States and Saving Private Ryan, and then what you have with the United Kingdom and even France. I say even France just because they weren't as involved with the evacuation of Dunkirk, but of course they were holding off the Nazi forces the whole
Yeah.
time. But Dunkirk is primarily focusing on British soldiers. But to show how highly valued how highly valued human life is for both the United Kingdom and for the United States.
Yeah.
That
I mean, in Saving Private Ryan, even when they let, when Tom Hanks's character, and I feel awful that I don't remember the
I'll
character.
try to look it up.
But when they have the one German or Nazi at least,
Yeah.
held prisoner essentially, and Tom Hanks, he says no, we're not going to, just assassinate him right here.
Right.
We have to let him go, and it is again showing that difference in ideology of, we can't become what they are,
Yeah.
and letting him go ultimately does, you know, come back to bite them, but it is, I don't think that they would have done it any differently. Like they couldn't have, because it's just the difference in ideology.
Yeah. Now, there is an interesting exception to that in Saving Private Ryan. You're absolutely right, and I know that's absolutely what Spielberg is doing. And just a little aside here, Tom Hanks, he played Captain John Miller. John Miller.
Okay, yeah,
Uh,
Miller.
so at one point, then you've got, oh, I don't know that I'm going to be able to remember the actor or character name, but the interpreter, the
Mm,
who
yeah.
is from Lost, where he is.
Oh yes.
Oh, man, now I can't even remember. Like, all I could think at the time when I was rewatching it is I'm just like, oh, it's what's his name from Lost. But
Yeah.
um, anyway, but the interpreter, then he is just paralyzed with fear when he's trying, and he knows that his friends are being uh, they've got no ammunition. They're on the second floor of this, building that's just completely in shambles. And then you've got the Nazi soldier who goes up there, and he, and if he went up earlier, then he would have been able to get the ammunition that they needed.
Yeah.
But he hesitated, and then even then he knows he can hear the struggle, and you're watching the struggle on screen, and you're coming back to him, and he's just paralyzed, right? But then the Nazi soldier who's just killed, I think it's two men, and basically, as in as close of quarters as possible, like physically, like grabbing the guy. It's not like just shooting, right? That's one kind
Right.
of killing in war, but it
Well,
is like hand to
the
hand combat.
the slow penetration of that knife is, ooh, it is so hard to watch.
It's
Oh.
brutal. It's brutal. And when you know that you do have the American soldier who's on the staircase, who
Hmm.
could go and just
Yeah.
shoot this Nazi in the back, but
And in so many other Hollywood films, then
he
that would be what happened.
he would
He would,
have.
yeah.
Exactly, he would have.
And it's
Uh,
brave, very, very brave of Spielberg to withhold that.
yes, exactly. To deny us that Hollywood moment. And
Yeah.
you've got to be out of your mind if you think there have not been soldiers who have been in that position where they do end up being paralyzed out of fear and whatever else that and this is why I said at the beginning, it's like, I mean, like, I can't judge anybody for anything because
Yeah.
you can't know how you would react until you're in that situation. And for this guy, he only went through basic training, and then his real skills were acting as an interpreter. So he was not battle hardened. He, you know what I mean? And his particular skills were not combat skills, but incredibly important skills, incredibly important to be able to translate. And so you do have a sense of sympathy. It's asking him to do something that he seems completely incapable of doing, of being on this combat mission. And at the same time, it's so difficult to just see him not be able to do it, right? You're just willing him to move into action. But then that Nazi soldier, interestingly, does not kill him.
Yeah.
And that's where I'm saying you do get a little bit of an exception there. Aside, like, because you are right that they do have that moment much earlier where they choose to release the Nazi soldier. It's like, well, we're not just going to execute him here. He's a prisoner of war, but we don't have the ability to take him as a prisoner of war. So we'll just, strip him of his weapons and send him on his way. But that shows that the United States cares about the sanctity of human life. But then you say, and that does pair, like, it contrasts with the ideology of Nazism. But then you do have that Nazi soldier who, and of course, not everybody who was fighting for Nazi Germany, it was actually a pretty small percentage. I believe it was only like 10% of them were enlisted in the Nazi party. The vast majority of them were just like, were drafted into the military, but they weren't part of the official Nazi party. Do you know what I mean by that? So it's like, and
they didn't share the same beliefs, but they were,
or they chose not to officially identify as sharing those beliefs, right? Yeah. It's like, because you could vote for like the Democrats or the Republicans without registering, for either party, right? So it's like, it's hard to say how much they identified with it, but it was not the majority of soldiers by any means who officially affiliated themselves with Nazism. So it's hard to say if that's what it was. I mean, the way I read that scene is just, he sees it as, this man is no threat. And he's not going to, he could have killed me at any point. He's incapable of killing me. So
it's almost more brutal though. Leaving him alive
to live with that,
traumatized. Right? Yeah. To
agree.
Suffer through that. I agree. For the rest of his life, knowing that he could have done something and he didn't. It's
I don't think there was the intention of cruelty there, but if there was, that's the far more cruel thing to do, to leave him alive than to kill him, and to let him live with it, right? And it's an interesting thing. So it's hard to say exactly what was happening there with intent with the Nazi soldier, but you do get that kind of complicating scene.
That's true.
Yeah. So aside from the frame narrative with Saving Private Ryan, then it's pretty much chronological.
I believe so.
Like, you get a little bit of Tom Hanks, Miller talking about, back home, but there's not much there. And the other thing too is that it's interesting the way, because I'm just trying to compare the two films. In terms of filming, then Spielberg, I don't know how you feel about it now, but I know, like, at the time, because I'm old enough to remember like how people reacted to Saving Private Ryan, because I was 14 at the time when it came out, so it's not like I was unaware of the film. I remember everybody talking about the opening, battle sequence on D-Day, but then the big thing that people talked about was the Steadicam, right? That, like, I don't know if you're aware of this, but I remember that, like, from 1998, that was what everybody was talking about, was the way he filmed it. Because look at any other Spielberg film up until this point. I'm not aware of him doing this in any other film. But the handheld, right, like Steadicam, like, as in, like, they've just got like the straps and all of that, and they're trying their best to keep it steady, but it's close quarters. There's no tripod. It's not on like a big boom arm, like a camera boom, where it's, sweeping across in this like smooth, fluid motions. That the entire thing is just
Yeah.
shaking.
Including
Like,
going under the water and above, and yeah.
yeah, yeah, that people talked about it saying that it's the most realistic depiction of World War II, in particular with the D-Day invasion, and that gives it this sense of veracity. Um,
Mm.
and
It certainly does convey the chaos that would have been there.
yeah,
Um, yeah, and just the fact that you didn't have time to pay, like if you were one of those soldiers, like you didn't have time to pay attention to anything further away, right? You were
right,
just focused on whatever's really close to you.
right,
Um, uh, I would imagine. Um,
yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, I mean, like, and even like trying to get to different various points on the beach because they hadn't
Hmm.
been to the beach in
Right.
years. So
Yeah.
this is why I'm saying that, like, you see, like Dunkirk, and obviously, like, this is not the same beach as where the Americans invaded, but I'm sure that Dunkirk was one of them because there's just a number of them, right? Like Dunkirk and
Hmm.
Juno and Normandy and, um, yeah,
Omaha. Yeah.
Omaha, yeah, that you get a bunch of the beaches in northern France where you look at what happened, like what it looks like at the end of Dunkirk, and then you look at what it looks like at the beginning of Saving Private Ryan, and then you're like,
Yeah.
if that's what it looked like when you left, and you go
Yeah.
away for like 4 years, you come back, and then it's like you're trying to use maps, but you don't even know necessarily. Like
Right.
I'm sure they did their very best to get some kind of surveillance, from
Mhm.
like whether it was like flying planes overhead or what, to try to get a sense of what the Nazis had set up, but um, trying to do that in any kind of organized way
Yeah.
seems like just an impossible task. Seems like an impossible task. And then um, once you got everybody shooting at you and explosions, and the Germans have got the high ground, and you're trying to get off of a boat into the water. Like, I mean, like, a lot of people are like, you want to see people look awkward. It's like, watch somebody like try to get out of like the deep end of the pool without using a ladder. You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah.
Like,
Yep.
it's hard to go from water to land, let alone trying to, like, hold your weapons and all of that gear, and you got people
Yeah.
shooting at you, and
Yeah.
like explosions and bodies flying everywhere.
Yep.
So Spielberg, I think, is using the Steadicam to capture the feeling of it, the chaos of it. Uh, I mean, personally, like, I appreciate what he's doing, but with everybody, like, I still remember people just being so blown away by it. But I don't, I don't know that that's. Do you think that Saving Private Ryan would, um, that's the only way to film it? I guess is my
No.
question. Yeah.
No.
See, I don't either. And when it comes to Dunkirk, it's like, as far as the narrative, I think that's the only way to tell that story.
Yes.
Saving Private
That.
Ryan, I'm not sure that that's the only way to film it.
Right. Well, okay, this does bring up Dunkirk was filmed for a large percentage of its runtime filmed using IMAX cameras.
Right.
Um, and I think that it definitely adds to the film. Did it need to be IMAX? Not necessarily, but I think the added height of the frame and everything just gives you, uh, yeah, just
It gives you a sense of the scale of the beach and
right. Yeah,
the scale of the evacuation attempt,
yeah,
right? That it shows you're able to just see just how exposed these soldiers are, because you really get that they're just so exposed on this beach.
yeah,
Uh, and what Spielberg is doing with Saving Private Ryan is it's claustrophobic. You're locked in. You at times it's you just you don't even know what to look at, because it's these quick cuts, this rapid editing, and a shaky cam, right? Like, it's a steady cam, but it's like there's a lot of shaking with it, and
yeah,
things are going out of focus, right? And it's moving around all over the place, and it certainly captures a sense of what it must have felt like, but of how disorienting it would have been for these soldiers invading. Uh, but I'm saying from a film standpoint, I don't know that that's I'm not trying to criticize the film, um, because I think you can make a really good case for it, but I don't think that's the only way that it could have been filmed.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I would agree. It is it's interesting to think about, how it could have been otherwise. Um,
Like I just would have, to me, if I were, and I mean, like I hesitate to say this because like I'm willing to like criticize a number of films and directors and screenwriters and all of that. It's a little bit hard to do that with Spielberg, and especially when it comes to like, not that Spielberg is flawless, because like he's done some stuff that I don't particularly like, but he's one of the greatest ever.
yeah.
And certainly with Saving Private Ryan, then it's hard to say, I've got notes for you, Mr. Spielberg, right?
Right.
But it's like, I just
Yeah.
feel like I get what he's doing. He's trying to establish the sense of claustrophobia, like to show you the
Mhm.
chaos of it. But I'm like, I just would have liked a couple establishing shots. I would have liked to have
Yeah.
just a little bit of distance and perspective, which you
Yeah,
never get.
because it almost makes the beach seem smaller, right?
Yes, it
And
does
it's
feel small, and it
yeah,
shouldn't.
right, because there were I don't know the numbers, but there were thousands, tens of thousands of soldiers who were storming those beaches.
It's got to be
Um,
hundreds of thousands. I'll double check for you, but yeah.
um, and yeah, we follow like or we see probably only about, I'd say, uh, generous estimate would be like 250 to 300 in that opening sequence.
Right.
And it's it is horrifying to see that many soldiers um, being shot at and killed and struggling to stay alive. Um, I mean, especially the one image that sticks in my brain is the soldier who grabs his own arm.
Yes, that's
Um,
always the one that gets me.
yeah. Um, but yeah, if we had gotten a couple of establishing shots to show how wide the beach is and how how many soldiers really this was happening to, because it wasn't just a concentrated effort, it was
No.
so broad.
Yes, it
Um,
was. I've got
and happening on a scale of like 1,000 to what we see.
exactly because I've got some quick numbers here. It involved more than 5,000 vessels as far as the boats. Nearly 160,000 troops.
Wow. Yeah.
160,000, and I mean the yeah. So I agree with you because it ends up feeling like a battle instead of like
Yeah.
this war at a scale of which I mean I don't know that we've ever seen before in human history. Like
Right.
to have
Yeah.
that many all at once
Yeah.
across this massive section, really, of Europe, to
Hmm.
because you're right, it's not like a single point. It wasn't like a precise, let's wedge ourselves in to this particular spot. It was everywhere. Like that went on for
Yeah.
miles and miles and miles and miles. Um, by the end of August, just within a couple months, they had something like 2 million soldiers across the channel into the northern part of Europe, right? But that initial assault, yeah, it's an incredible amount of people, and I guess that's the thing is like I've only heard, and I mean I haven't really looked into any like criticism, and I don't mean like a critique, but I just mean like I haven't done enough reading on what
Mhm.
like critics or film theorists have said about Saving Private Ryan. I've looked at a little bit, but not much, and I don't really I haven't seen people talk about that. I hear all of the praise for what he's doing, but I'm
Right.
like but it does feel small, and it shouldn't feel small. It should not. It should
Yeah.
feel overwhelming, because you should get a sense of, it wasn't just a few hundred guys where a lot of them died when they first invaded. It's that, if you can, I don't even know how you wrap your head around the fact that you've got like 160,000 men who are going to storm Nazi like bunkers across, like, who've got the high ground. You're going to jump into the water. They're just going to be like, just hammering you with everything, with grenades and rockets and like cannons and machine guns.
I mean,
And
I don't know what percentage of, those soldiers survived, but it's, you
and
know,
certainly if you were on the front lines, if you were the first wave,
yeah, you knew going in that you probably,
yeah,
like, in all likelihood, you were not going to make it.
right.
And
I think that's the
yeah,
only way you could approach it. I don't, you'd have to be
yeah,
out of your mind to think that that's not likely. Like that was
yeah,
far more likely than not, that you're not going to survive. But the only way you're ever going to get any kind of a foothold in Europe, certainly Northern Europe, is just by doing that. I don't know what
yeah,
else you could do.
yeah,
Um, and so the bravery of the men, and to do that. And it's interesting because I think that you're getting that both with Dunkirk and with Saving Private Ryan, to see the bravery of men like in Dunkirk to wait,
yeah,
to not turn on each other, not turn on their commanding officers, to
right,
wait. And I'm not trying to be funny here, but like it is kind of a funny thing, but like a good British person, just
right.
this sucks, but I'm not going to complain. You know, just like
Yes, yeah,
just quietly stand there and deal with
yeah.
it.
Yeah, it is getting back to, the scale of what we see. We do get so many of those shots in Dunkirk where we see
Yes.
the entire beach
Yeah.
full, everybody standing on the port, or
Yeah.
what
They
do
call
you
it the
call
mole, right? Like,
right.
oh, you mean the pier?
Like,
The
yeah, the pier.
yeah.
Thank you. Um, yeah, that you just see all those bodies huddled together, and but yes, there is a
And
distinct
they're
difference between what's going on in Saving Private Ryan and Dunkirk, in that Saving Private Ryan is about, and I mean, Spielberg made or produced a whole series called Band of Brothers,
yeah.
specifically about this, and
Yeah.
that is essentially what Saving Private Ryan is about. It is about a small group of soldiers who know each other so well,
Yeah.
and then contrasting that entirely is Dunkirk, where nobody seems to know each other,
Yeah, that's a good point.
where
That's a really good
they
point.
vote literally at one point, and but they don't know each other, and they just have to stand there together and realize that they are all in this together.
Yeah. Yeah, and to feel helpless. Like that's the
Yeah,
thing is, and you do get that good line in Dunkirk of the captain of the Moonstone, where he says to the um, uh, what's his name, Killian Murphy? Is that it?
yeah,
Did I get it? I
yep.
can never remember his name. But
I
what
always
he's
get confused by the pronunciation of his
right.
first name.
I
I don't
know.
know if
I
it's
just look at it and I
Cillian or
give up.
Killian.
That's my issue. I look at it and I go, I don't know. but
Right.
but yeah, so Mr. Murphy, what he says to him is that, because Killian Murphy says, like, well, you don't even have guns. And he's like, well, you had a gun. Like, did that help? Like,
Right.
right? And
Yeah.
it's like that's kind of like a sense of what you get. I feel like with both Dunkirk and with Saving Private Ryan, with at least the
Yeah.
initial like invasion, it's just like, I mean, you might as well not even have a gun. Like,
Yeah.
to just charge and then just like you'll pick up something along the way. Like having a rifle in your hands, I don't know what difference that would make. You're not going to be able to pick off anybody who's up there in a bunker, with everything protecting them, like against snipers and machine gunners and, guys like firing like these big cannons at you. You might as well just have your hands free and just like, so that way, like you can like use them to grab things as you run like that. But the bravery of both of these moments in World War II for the people doing it, like it's staggering. It's
absolutely
genuinely staggering. And it's depicted, like I say, it's depicted so well in both of them, very different approaches. And the only thing that I have is I just wish Spielberg, I'm fine with the Steadicam. I just wish that we had a little bit more sense of the scale. I get why he doesn't do it. But it in some ways I feel like it kind of diminishes the breadth of what was happening, the scale of it, to show that there's a lot more. It's more, he's giving us more of a portrait than a landscape, right? Yeah. It's very, very focused on a small group of people, but Dunkirk, it's a landscape. It's like, look at everything that you're getting here, even in terms of the way they filmed it. Then you've got that up close quarters filming style that you have in Saving Private Ryan compared to IMAX of Dunkirk.
Yeah, absolutely. It is, and I do want to make it clear that I do not want to see or hear a single person ask, which do you prefer? They are both incredible films and they do different things, and I don't want to say that one is better than the other.
I mean, I don't think that's ever an interesting conversation
right.
to me, like, because I've got more of like a film criticism and film theory approach where it's just, let's talk about what's fascinating and like techniques and effect and, the intention and all these different things, the screenwriting, the direction, and what happens when you do all of these things. When people are just like, I give it 4 out of 5 stars. I'm like, you're an idiot. Like it's so reductive to reduce something like, like something like Dunkirk or Saving Private Ryan to a star system just seems just so absurd. It's just, you know what I mean?
Absolutely.
No, I'm not really interested in the which is better because I don't ever think that that's a very productive conversation. But as far as like, and there's so much, I think that like Saving Private Ryan, it's now getting up there. It's 21 years old, right? So, so it's interesting. I mean, it obviously it continues to hold up well. The only thing that I would say in Saving Private Ryan that I'm not sure that I'm a fan of. I'm trying not to be mean here, but Vin Diesel's character to me just did not work.
I had him right in my mind as you were starting that sentence.
He's in a totally different movie.
Yes.
He is just in a different movie. Whatever he was trying to do, he was not in this is going to be an intense, Oscar-worthy World War II drama. It was more like, I don't know, an action-adventure World War II film.
Yeah. And I don't even want to, fully put the blame on Vin Diesel, the actor.
No, I'm not saying
how his character is written.
Yes. Like, and when I say Vin Diesel, I don't mean him as an actor or acting choices. I agree with you because I'm not saying that. I'm saying that for whatever reason, his
character does not fit.
That's right. His character does not fit. Because you do have a couple other characters who are a little bit more, like, I think it's Adam Goldberg's character who's a little bit more of I think it's Adam Goldberg. I can never remember his name, but
I know who you're talking about, but I have no idea what his name is.
I mean, I've seen him in so many different things. But in any case, then he has got some, like, he makes jokes throughout the film, right? But it doesn't come across quite the same way as whatever Vin Diesel's character is doing. And I think that for whatever reason, I was, it feels very much like, oh, there's Vin Diesel. Like, I don't feel like you
Yes.
do that with anybody else. I don't think you look at that and you go like, oh, Tom Hanks is trying to be a World War II soldier. Like, you're just like,
Right.
he's very believable. But I think in part because Vin Diesel, whether it's, I don't know, is it like all the Fast and Furious movies? Is that what it is? Like, I don't know. It seems
Yeah.
a little
It's
strange seeing him in an intense drama like this.
yeah, I agree. It is uh yeah, it's his he very much seems like he is trying to um be a hero,
Yeah,
and that's not what the movie is about.
exactly.
Yeah.
His character, at least the way it's
He's like,
depicted.
here, we got to save this little girl.
Yeah,
And here, I'm just going to run out here, even though we don't know what's out there.
yeah.
Like, it, that's, no other character does things
No.
like that. And it is jarring to see that.
He yeah, the what his character does seems like somebody who doesn't know that he's in the movie where main characters die.
Right.
He's acting like the kind of character. I'm saying he's in a totally different movie, the kind of movie where you can
Yeah.
do reckless things, like you can jump out of whatever story like window and you're going to be okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
He acts like that. And yeah, it's just that's the only thing in Saving Private Ryan that when I watched it again that I just felt like, okay, that stands out.
Right. Yeah. Uh, yeah, it is fascinating because there are so many well-known
Yeah,
actors in Saving Private Ryan. You've got, Paul Giamatti,
yeah.
obviously Tom Hanks, Vin Diesel, and oh man, now I'm blanking on what was
I'll
the other
pull it
one
up.
that I was thinking? Um, oh, I'm
All
so
right.
frustrated that I'm like not thinking of it. Um, And I mean, in Dunkirk, you obviously do get some star power, uh, but it's not to the same degree. I think for the most part, then you're just seeing people and not seeing actors.
Right. Yeah,
Um,
I agree. In terms of Saving Private Ryan, you're right. Like you've got Tom Hanks, Adam Goldberg. I'm just going through like the key ones: Matt Damon, Tom Sizemore, Vin Diesel, Paul Giamatti. Um, oh, who else do we have in here? Ted Danson is in there, right? That's a big
mm,
one where it's like, oh,
yeah.
Ted Danson is in the military. Nathan Fillion is in it as
Yes,
well.
that's the one that I was going to bring up. And that sequence with Nathan Fillion's character is very interesting, because he is playing James Franklin Ryan as opposed to James Francis
Right,
Ryan.
right.
Um, and
Yes.
yeah, for him to be told, that his brothers are dead
Yeah,
and that he's at war and he knows that his brothers are back home,
yeah,
that I cannot imagine getting that news of thinking that your younger brothers
yeah,
who are in grade school
yeah.
have all somehow perished at the
Right,
same time.
right.
Um, and yeah, it's it's a very fascinating moment in the film.
It is. It ends up taking a little bit of a turn because he ends up like it to me it seems like it's almost turning towards comedy where he's
I
just like
agree.
and
Yeah.
I just think that it went too long and I guess that's another moment in there cuz I do think with Saving Private Ryan when I'm saying it's like it's getting up there it's like 21 years old then and it holds up really really well but I do think there are a couple moments where I just go for an intense drama about such a serious subject there
Yeah.
is a little bit of inconsistency in tone and
Yeah.
yeah because I just thought that moment just went on too long
Hmm.
um, the Another actor too that I just didn't get to is Bryan Cranston as well. Is in here.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, where
Absolutely.
and I mean at the time, even though he was still a pretty big star, because I'm pretty like Malcolm in the
Mm,
Middle must have been going on in 1998, right?
I believe so. Yeah.
Yeah,
I
and he
think it would
was
have been in its early seasons, but
yeah,
yeah.
but like Bryan Cranston obviously like once Breaking Bad really took off, then just became
Yeah.
this whole other thing. So it's like
Yeah.
it's I mean, and same thing with Vin Diesel. That it's like Vin Diesel
Right.
after this ends up becoming. So there's a little bit when you look at this and you just say, now it's got star power,
Yes.
right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And even with Matt Damon, I don't know how much. I'm sure this is after Good Will Hunting, right? Or is it
Uh,
not?
I am not sure, but I know he is very young in this film.
Yeah.
Um, yeah. Um, it's it is interesting because, of course, Dunkirk has I believe his name is Harry Styles from One Direction.
Yeah,
Uh,
I saw that afterwards. Like when I was looking at it, I'm going, Harry Styles. I've heard that name. I have no idea who that is. I'm like, I think
yeah,
teen girls like him. I couldn't pick him out of a lineup. I have no
I
idea
know.
who he is. I don't even know
Yeah,
which one he plays.
I don't know either, and I know it's just kind of I mean maybe if you're a teenage girl and you're watching it, then that stands out to you, but
Right, right.
um but yeah, no, between him, Killian Murphy, and I want to say Ewan McGregor is in it as well, isn't it? No, I might be
In
totally
Dunkirk?
yeah, I might be totally I thought that he was one of the pilots maybe. No, I think
No.
I got confused about that, and then
Yeah,
yeah, never mind.
right. But yeah, it's Tom Hardy though who plays
Right.
the
Yeah.
one pilot, right? That is his name, isn't it?
Yeah.
I just know it's like he just loves covering his face.
Right.
Like, you know what I
Yes.
mean? He's a
Yeah.
very good-looking actor, and
Mhm.
but at the same time, then he's like, "Hey, do I get to wear a jock strap on my face?" And they're like, "Yes." Then he's like, "I'm in." And then it's
Yeah.
like, "Oh, do I have
That's
to
a
show my face?"
that's a really good point because yeah, Dunkirk, The Dark Knight
Yep, he
Rises,
plays
and
Bane. Oh, I've got a jock strap on my face. Dunkirk,
yeah,
he's got this thing on his face the entire time.
and then Mad Max Fury Road.
Correct. Then he's like, "Oh, do I get to have this thing on my face the entire time?" That's how you get him to do any movie, is just like write in some kind of a mask that he's going to have on his face, and he's going to do it.
Yeah. Yeah.
He can't help himself. I don't know why. It's not like he like you know what I mean. Like he's known as being a very good looking actor, and then he's
Yeah.
just like cover my face.
Yes. Yeah. I should mention you are looking quite
I
dark
I know
now.
I was trying to fix that, but let me go turn on a light.
Yeah.
I was trying to rely too much on natural light, and
Yeah.
then I just lost the light. So,
Yeah.
um, all right. So, do you have any other thoughts with either film? I mean, like we keep talking, but I feel like I've said mostly what I want to say in comparing the two.
Yeah, I think I'm more or less done, but I would like to mention on the boy in Dunkirk, um, who like I think it's the brother, correct? Um, I don't know if it's a brother or what, but where
I think
they
he's just a
don't.
family friend, the one who
Oh,
ends up
okay.
dying.
Yes, yeah,
Yeah, I believe he's just a family friend.
yeah, and yeah. So that is really, really, uh, really powerful to see. Um, it's powerful from the sense that you are getting a soldier who is, trying to escape the war, who ends up causing a death, of one of his countrymen,
Yeah,
um, uh, and it's purely because of PTSD. where he is
Yeah.
so traumatized, where he does not want to be going anywhere near France, and the way that it's played out, um, where it ends with the boy dying, and then later on, then you have the soldier uh, ask, "Is the boy all right?"
Yeah.
And it's yeah, he'll be fine. And I think that is just so beautifully done, because you don't want to add any more trauma onto these soldiers who have been through so much.
Absolutely. Yeah, it is one of the most affecting moments of the film. And there's multiple moments like that in the film, but
Hmm.
that is certainly one of the most powerful ones that you get. And there's actually two moments like this that are both associated with that character. I really wish I can't find his name. But in any case, but the young boy who dies, you get two good lies that come out of this. Do you,
Right.
because, but it's an act of mercy in the first case, right? And it's an act of grace in the second case. And so, but they're both good lies. And so the first one is where he tells that soldier, like, no, he'll be fine. And that is an act of mercy, because what difference does it make if you tell this man that, like, what good will come from telling him that he died? Because it number one, it was an accident. Number two, he's
Yeah.
already traumatized. He might not ever be okay again, as the father says, right? That, like,
Yeah.
knowing that for these people who have gone through this, they refer to it as shell shock, but it's, of course, it's PTSD is the term that we would use now.
Yeah.
And to then add to that this, an additional um, kind of trauma that he would have to live with forever. It like, and this is why I'm saying that it's an act of mercy. It's that, well, he did kill the boy, right?
Yeah.
And he did kill the boy out of his own terror and out of his own trauma. So, as far as what he deserved to know the truth, but it was merciful to spare him the truth. It was merciful to provide him the lie rather than to provide him with the truth. And so it's
Yeah.
this beautiful act of mercy, but and so that's why I'm saying it's a good lie in that case. And then at the end of it, then you get another good lie, which is an act of grace, which is, essentially unmerited, undeserved favor, right? That it's like grace is like you didn't deserve it. You haven't earned it, but you receive it anyway. Um, where you get the news article that the older boy publishes saying local boy 17 hero at Dunkirk. And
Yeah.
that is, it's not mercy, because he's not trying to spare anyone there. I mean, like,
Yeah.
maybe the boy's family to some degree, but that doesn't seem really it. It's that he is giving this boy all of this, attributing valor and courage when he did have it to insist to go on the boat, but he really didn't get an opportunity to really show it.
Yeah.
So he's giving him more credit than he deserves as an act of grace. And so it is a lie in a sense, but it's another good lie. And those two
Yeah.
things together are these beautiful, good pieces of fiction within this story that you appreciate so much. And then you say, but the intention behind it is good, right?
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. It is. It really is a beautiful element to the film. Um,
Yeah.
yeah.
And as far as, like, to kind of bring this back to Saving Private Ryan, you don't get the same thing with Saving Private Ryan at the end. It's interesting what Tom Hanks's character, did I say it's Miller? Is that right? I
Yes.
forgot it
Yeah.
already. But what he says to Ryan at the end, it's, um, what is it? Like, I forget exactly what he says, but, like, earn it, right? Doesn't he say that?
Right. Yeah. I think make it worth it.
Yeah, make it worth it.
Yeah.
And it's moving in a sense, um, but it's a little frustrating at the end. To me, it's a little frustrating at the end of Saving Private Ryan, where you've got James Ryan, who is at the graveside for Tom Hanks, and then he asks his wife if he's a good man. You know what I mean? And he's saying, like, I hope
Right.
that I made it, that I like earned it, that I made it
Mm.
worth it, right? And that he asks her if he's a good man. And like part of me is just, I'm like, you've got to be kidding me that you're like in your 70s, late 60s, and you don't know that you earned it. Like, turn around, dude. How have you not
Right.
like
Yeah.
reflected on it until now? And maybe he has at multiple points, but I don't think that worked as well as what you get with Dunkirk, where it's like the way they treat the death of this boy, of
Hmm.
saying that he died and what good can come out of him dying. Then it's like, well, we're going to attribute all of this valor to him, which he didn't really deserve, and we're going to spare the person who died for him the awful reality that he did die as a result of what you did, right? That you look at that and you're just like, that's just such a beautiful moment. And then in Saving Private Ryan, then you're just like, it's I don't know.
It, yeah, I am I am torn on that because I do definitely see your point, and I also see what I can see uh, how James Ryan would feel that essentially nothing he ever did would
Yes,
make up
of
for the
course.
sacrifice
That
of not just Miller, but all of the soldiers who fought to save him.
Yes, okay, that's good. That's a good way of putting it, because you are right that like the debt that he has to pay is like
Hmm.
just impossible to pay back, right? It's
Yeah.
impossible. I guess what I'm saying is, in a sense, you get more of a Hollywood ending with Dunkirk, but Dunkirk I think is a very anti-Hollywood film, but with
Right.
that article, because you're attributing all this valor to this kid who really didn't deserve it. But then like Tom Hanks, by saying like make it worth it or earn it or whatever he says, it just I'm like screw you, dude. Like, don't put
Yeah.
that on this guy. You're gonna
Right.
put that
Yes.
on this guy. Like, he didn't
Yeah.
ask you to do it, and now you're going to tell him that he has to measure the quality of his life to the death of like, I don't know, a dozen guys who came for him ultimately. Like,
Yeah. Like at least a half dozen, but
yeah, it
yeah.
was like a half dozen. It wasn't a dozen, but yeah, like you're gonna tell him that he has to constantly evaluate his life and look back and say, was it worth all of these other guys dying in order for him to be saved? That just
Yeah.
seems like the kind of burden to put on a person that is just so brutal. And then you look at the relief of a burden in Dunkirk, where
Yes.
Cillian Murphy
Yeah.
says, is he going to be all right? And it's like, yeah, he'll be all right. He'll be fine. The relief of that burden, right? Where you say,
Yeah.
like, what an act of mercy there, but what a burden to lay on a person in Saving Private Ryan. And then
Exactly.
at the end of it, then I'm like, it's not. It's to me, it's a frustrating moment in the film, because
Yeah.
he's just
I,
like,
I
am I a good person? Like, I hope I made it worth it. And it's just like, well, if
right.
that's the standard that you're trying to live your life according to, like, I don't see how you can ever live up to that.
Yeah, because it is, I think, something that I think it it could have gone without saying. Like
Yes.
obviously
Yes.
he is
Yes.
going to, be constantly thinking about the sacrifice of all these other people
Right.
just to save him. We didn't need it to be verbalized.
No.
And
I
yeah,
agree.
yeah.
I think that's really it. And I think that's why I don't like it. It's that
Hmm.
it as much as it's kind of like, I don't know, an anti-Hollywood thing, because it's just such a brutal thing to say, but it's that it also just seems so transparently obvious, like the purpose of the film, which is, of course, it was worth
Yeah.
it. Look at his entire family. Look at like the peace and tranquility that you have in the United States. Like, sure, they're in Arlington, but like you see that it's like it's not German controlled, it's not German occupied. Do you know what I mean?
Right.
America, we know,
Yeah.
is free, and he's got his full like family with generations of people. And you look at that, it's like the message of the film seems very obvious that like anyone involved in this, even those who sacrificed their lives to save Ryan, they would all say like, oh yeah, he made it worth it. And then Ryan's
Yeah.
like, is it? And
Yeah.
yeah, it didn't have to be said. Like what Tom Hanks said to him, I think was an unnecessary line of dialogue.
Hmm.
I like the frame narrative, but I'm not sure that I like that dialogue that you get at the end there.
Yeah.
I just think it could
Yeah.
have been done a little bit differently and probably better.
Yeah. A little more nuanced.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Um, yeah. Okay. Do you want to stop there?
Yeah, I think so. And yeah, of course, we thank all the veterans and soldiers who have fought for the freedom that we experience every day in Canada and the United States, as well as all over the world.
Europe and yeah,
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 it is.
everywhere.
Uh, it is something that uh, we do at the very least take one day a year to reflect on, whether or not we have made it worth it in the way that we
I
live our
agree.
lives.
And I think that's what Spielberg was doing with Saving Private Ryan. I think he was trying to, I'm sure that he was trying to get people in the theater and people watching it at home to ask themselves the question, have I made it worth it? Right? That
Yes.
look at how many people died in order for us to, remain a free country. And then to say, the daily choices that I'm making in my overall life, am I making it worth it for everyone who came before me, who fought and laid down their life, or even if they didn't lay down their life in battle, they fought and had to deal with trauma for the rest of
Yes.
their lives,
Yeah.
whether it was, like physical disabilities, or just, psychological trauma,
Hmm.
that it's one of those things. And I guess my point, looking at it, then I say the burden that you're laying on Ryan, that Tom Hanks says to Ryan, it's so heavy handed. And it's like, well, he can't
Hmm.
live up to that standard. And it's like, I think anybody who's being honest with themselves would have to say the same thing. It's like, well, no, I
Yeah.
can't live up to that standard. Like, have I made it worth it? Like, I mean, no, there's no way to repay that, to
Yes.
like
Absolutely.
to repay the fact that so many soldiers um, laid down their lives, and the trauma that their family experienced, and
Hmm.
for all of their descendants to just be no more, like to just never happen, right? That all of those
Yeah.
men who died, they didn't get to come home like Ryan did and have children and grandchildren and great grandchildren. That it's like you just got all these people where it was wiped out. In like, you can't live a good enough life to repay somebody for that. You just
Yeah.
can't.
Yeah.
And I think that's part of it. That's why I'm saying I don't quite like that message at the end of Saving Private Ryan, because it's like we can't thank them enough. We can't live a good enough life to make it
Hmm.
worth it. But we can express gratitude and say
Yes.
it was more than I deserved, and I'm grateful
Yes.
for that, right?
Yeah.
And I mean, I think that's what I would say. And especially like whether, and it is important to take at least one day a year to recognize all of our veterans for what they did, and everybody else involved. Not just the men who fought, but the women who acted in all kinds of ways, whether it was making munitions or acting as nurses and everything else. But with all of the wars, I mean, like there's so much there. But
Yeah.
at the very least, I'm saying, because it can get a little, I think, especially now, it can get a little complicated when people get into, just and unjust wars and conflicts and whatever else.
Right.
But I'm saying, at the very least, everyone can come alongside with World War II. That was a war worth fighting. Um,
Yeah. And I think regardless of whether or not you agree with the justification of any war, you still should thank those who serve because they are not the ones who make the decisions about whether or not they'll
No,
fight. Um,
absolutely.
and
Yeah,
and the fact that they are willing to do that is uh, it is unspeakably generous.
it
Um,
is, and it remains to this day to anyone
yes,
in active duty. Then
yeah.
yeah, thank you. I
It's
mean,
something that I know that, like I can't do. But and I thank you for your service. It is,
yeah,
yeah,
yeah, I agree, and that's the thing is that you need the the free world benefits from the fact that there are people whose bravery exceeds that of a common person by such a degree it's hard to even measure, right?
yeah,
To be willing to do that to as an act of service for freedom. I mean, it's really it's hard to express in words, but yeah, hopefully we've done that with the podcast, and these films I think do a really good job of that.
absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. Also, thank you to the filmmakers
yeah,
for
to the filmmakers for sure.
making these stories, more palatable, I guess, than simply reading it in a textbook or what have you. This is a brilliant way of conveying these historical events
Yeah,
in a way that I think it does do justice to the soldiers who fought.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. It does, and I hope that more people, you know, continue to pay attention to these things like that, or
Mhm.
more people do pay attention to things like this because, yeah, I mean, I've been a history teacher off and on for most of my career, and I know that there can be a certain amount of apathy amongst kids, but like the
Yeah,
more you teach them, the more they learn, the more they get a sense of how blessed they are to live in a time of relative peace in the world, and that came at a cost. That usually it's like the more people pay attention to it, the more they realize just how grateful they really should be,
yeah,
you know.
yeah,
So and yeah, these films do a really good job of that. um, all right, folks, we're gonna wrap it up there, right?
yeah.
Okay. So feel free to comment below and like and subscribe and share and whatever else. And I hope that you appreciated that. And we'll see you next time. Bye.
Bye.
Ignore the bell, people. We're gonna keep going. We're still ignoring it. Don't worry. I, I don't know what that. I think that's the fire drill. All right, we're gonna go home. Yeah. All right, we're done.